big data analytics, as well as the topic of One Health and minorities in different areas around, and advocating for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I will show a video of our lab.
The Metabolism of Cities Living Lab is a multi-actor network partnership of researchers, knowledge creators, and thought leaders connected together to mobilize expertise on the SDGs in Southern California and Baja California, Mexico regions' overall performance.
For vulnerable communities in Southern California, social, environmental, and economic injustices can be especially devastating during times of difficulty, creating a divide between where we are and where we want to be. Diversity and inclusion isn't just about equality, it's about leaving no one behind and connecting us to each other during times of need. To our environment, to our communities, and to our neighbors, connecting us to everything and everyone we love, we now have the opportunity to think differently about how we connect and plan our cities. A chance to truly innovate across our metropolitan regions and international borders. A chance for cities to localize the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal targets for the development of the world to 2030. A catalyst for change is the Metabolism of Cities Living Lab, hosted by the Center for Human Dynamics in the Mobile Age at San Diego State University. The Living Lab will accommodate, enable, drive the diversity of individual communities by viewing the city as a living organism. We can imagine innovative ways to think of a city. We can track, monitor, and forecast material, energy, information, and people flows to localize the global goals, driving progress, ambition, and vision to improve social, economic, and environmental outcomes in the local region. The international border is the playground of the Living Lab. Our Big Ideas vision leverages the integration of smart urban systems, citizen science, big data analysis, and model forecasting, with an overarching goal of providing data-driven tracking and monitoring of sustainability. As part of our toolkit, the SDSU Sustainable Development Goals Tracking Dashboard can monitor, explore sustainability trends, indicators, and related targets. The dashboard can enable us to visualize, analyze, and download data and help foster a strong community in the Baja Californias. Governments, academics, and others can use the dashboard to perform easy analysis of sustainability, important to make the decisions that affect our underrepresented communities. Our research outputs can provide a resource to higher education institutes through teaching, research, partnerships, dialogue, and organizational practices. We apply science and we engineer the future because it is exploring and solving that moves us forward. It lifts us. It's what makes the world better. It's what makes us SDSU. We believe that there's nothing in this world that can't be made better, more efficient, cleaner, smarter, more life-affirming, life-saving, and life-improving. So we discover, teach, ponder, and manage from the edges to its center. Our region can be more connected through thoughtful planning and careful execution. We reimagine SDSU as a leader in sustainable development in Southern California and the Baja California, Mexico region. To support the Metabolism of Cities Living Lab, please check out our website.
All right, going back. So the Metabolism of Cities Living Lab originated back in 2019. We're under the Center for Human Dynamics in the Mobile Age, located in the Department of Geography at San Diego State University. In addition to working on topics related to the US-Mexico border, we have done several different initiatives and have worked with different partners in different places around the world. We've worked on projects related to advocating for the SDGs through this SDGs in Action. We have classes where we have our students work on projects related to the Sustainable Development Goals. In the past, we have developed citizen science activities, developed tools, virtual reality games. Additionally, we are now working on developing an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding partnership with Italy. But as of now, we have one with the university, a university in Mexico, in Tijuana, UABC. We've also participated for the past years in several different international conferences and events. And for the past years, we have integrated further information on our SDG tracking dashboard. We are always collaborating with different types of universities, different local governments, individuals, and different organizations, and always focusing on the topic of underrepresented communities. Our lab is data-oriented, where we develop analysis, processing, data sharing, as well as sharing knowledge and providing knowledge. We have focused on 6 different areas of our work, from sustainable food, land, water, and oceans, education, gender, and equality, sustainable cities and communities, health, well-being, and demography, energy decarbonization and sustainable industry, digital revolution for sustainable development. And then last year, we inaugurated an exhibition called Metabolism of Cities SDG for SDSU, Leave No One Behind. The idea was to advocate for vulnerable communities along the US-Mexico border. And we created this mural here that you see. And if you can take a look at our virtual exhibition, on the top right, there's a QR code that you can take a photo, and it will take you to our virtual exhibition. The idea was to develop an exhibition that not only can be explored physically, but also virtually for those that cannot attend, making the exhibition inclusive for everyone. Here you can see more of the inauguration of the exhibition. During the exhibition, we also had our students present some of their different projects, always relating to advocating for the UN Sustainable Development Goals in San Diego County. Additionally, our students have developed interactive dashboards for different areas across San Diego County. They work well on selecting different vulnerable communities, if that is people with disability, elderly, homeless, refugees, you name it, different types of ethnic communities. The idea is to create awareness about how these different groups are being left behind. In order to help local governments achieve the SDGs, it is important to think about what are the different types of accounting methodologies that can be useful to account the different types of information that go into the city, come out of the city, and remain in the city. Through the topic of urban metabolism, it is a metaphor in order to develop awareness about the overconsumption that is occurring in our cities. The topic of urban metabolism has evolved from a qualitative aspect to also a quantitative aspect. It is viewed the city as a living organism. Just like a living organism, a city needs energy, water, and nutrients to grow and expand. Through this metaphor, we aim to create awareness about the overconsumption that are happening in our cities. This type of methodology has evolved into different types of accounting tools. If you see on the right, we see the urban metabolism of Brussels, Belgium, where different types of resources are being accounted. You can see the material that is coming out, the material that goes into the city, as well as the material that remains. So it has become from a metaphor now used as a methodology tool, specifically an environmental accounting tool. Since the beginning of urban metabolism that was created and coined by Abel Woolman in 1965, the methodology has evolved through different sectors. From Marxist ecology, from comparing man, understanding man versus nature. It has also been utilized in factories in order to understand the consumption levels and how in different types of industries are affecting environmental aspects. And now urban metabolism has been utilized in the city through urban ecology. So
Just a
urban
second.
metabolism has evolved significantly from a methodological point of view, partly due to changes in data format and accessibility.
Just 1 second, Dr. Fernandez. Just to recap, also, if you have question in the meanwhile, just interrupt. So, as Dr. Fernandez has said, metabolism has started as a metaphor and then has become a methodology to, in a way, understand the ecology and also the material flows inside the urban, industrial environment, and so on and so forth. So, sorry, Dr. Fernandez, please.
Yes. As Dr. Vito has mentioned, urban metabolism has evolved in several different types of environmental methodologies. Material flow analysis is one of the umbrellas of urban metabolism. It is an analytical method to quantify the flows and stocks of material or substances found inside of a defined system boundary. So how has material flow analysis been utilized in order to create environmental assessment impacts? Well, it has been utilized in order to help us map these different flows that are coming into the city, are leaving the city, and remaining into our city. It has allowed us to develop Sankey flows to visualize those different flows and stocks. It has helped us to analyze and evaluate different aspects of the flows within the city. Also looking at much more of a microscopic angle, looking at different sectors or neighborhoods as well. Material flow analysis advocates for the 3 different R's, from reducing the movement of handling a material or reducing the distance movement, so reduce. Recycling, making sure that material that is, let's say, in waste can be come back into the city through a different use, and as well as reuse. So reduce, recycling, and reuse. Urban metabolism has evolved to develop policies. This type of aspect, it has helped streamline city scans through an online tool. So several different city scans have been incorporated in order to understand the existing conditions of specific neighborhoods or specific areas within the city. It is through the metabolic thinking in the built environment in cities. The use of urban metabolism thinking in strategic planning towards a holistic conscious society, making sure that we move in a direction of sustainability by using more holistic approaches.
1 second, Dr. Fernandez. Just to stress the point that this methodology, as we tell in the beginning, can be very useful for addressing the policy making. Once you have a tool to measure, once you have a tool to render what's happening in the phenomena, then you can also propose some solution and some, say, policy making.
Since the initiation of coining the term urban metabolism in 1965, urban metabolism has evolved into different sectors and has been visualized and interpreted in different forms. Here you can see different types of interpretations of different Sankey forms, different material flow analysis of all around the world. You can see how material flow analysis has been utilized to track different types of energies, consumptions, as well as identifying the urban metabolism of specific cities, measuring energy, water, materials, greenhouse gas emissions, the water outputs, as well as different types of material outputs. In order to help local governments achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, it is important to make sure that also no one is left behind, but also consider different types of environmental assessment tools that can help visualize and monitor different aspects of the city. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, have created the SDG Index and dashboard in order to track the progress of different countries around the world. Here you can see the SDG regional dashboard, where red indicates that the SDGs have not been met, green indicates they have been met, and yellow indicates that they are currently in progress. The UN Sustainable Development Goals Report 2021, and more recently, there's a new one in 2023 that has now been out to the public, has developed an interactive dashboard in order to visualize the progress of the SDGs. Here you can see an example of Algeria, and you can understand the progress of the SDGs. As the yellow arrow means there's current progress, and the red indicates that there's still more work that needs to be done. In the Sustainable Development Report dashboard, you can download the material and also understand how your country is doing. Here you can see that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done for all the red SDGs, which remain major challenges. Additionally to assessing environmental impacts in cities, it is also important to understand how people, what people's perceptions and attitudes are concerning the consumption levels found in cities. In this particular research, we developed 7 different campaigns in Milan as well as Mantova, Italy, in order to create awareness about the UN Sustainable Development Goals through different activities. We work with children, with people with disabilities, elderly, homeless and refugees, children, as I mentioned, and students and academic, as well as the LGBT community. In this particular research on the left side, we developed a survey where we asked students from different places at the Politecnico de Milano about which SDGs were more important to them. So this type of information can be very useful for local governments to have a better idea and understand how people are feeling concerning different topics. These were some of the questions that were asked during our study. We wanted to know what country and continent the participants were from, how they identified the concept of urban metabolism, what would be the most efficient methodology to apply to evaluate city resources, the most important SDG target, the least important SDG target in their own individual cities. If they can describe their city political system in one word, what would it be? The corruption level, and what can their city do to achieve the SDGs? And besides recycling and raising prices on materials, how can cities better manage their natural resources? So here we found that the majority, of course, of our participants were from Europe with 53.7%. And here you can see some of the different activities that were conducted during this 7 campaigns, where we interviewed students. Okay, so now I wanted to discuss more about the different types of environmental assessments. And this type of tools can be useful also for your individual research in order to identify major factors, negative factors that are found inside the city. So what is circular economy? You might have heard it before. Circular economy. In a circular economy, materials are retained in the economy and waste are considered valuable resources. So these are primary waste management options, are reuse and recycling. Could be some of the aspects. So waste prevention strategies at all levels of the design of the supply chain. These could be design, for example, distribution, use and consumption, disposal, and reduce pressures on the environmental from raw material extraction and waste management. So here you can see the 3 different areas. So it could help us create an effective after use, an example of plastic economy, drastically reduce the leakage of plastics into the natural systems and other negative externalities, and 3, decouple plastics from fossil feedstocks. Through the process of circular economy assessment, I will discuss 5 different environmental assessments that have been utilized in the past in order to understand the existing conditions and major factors found in cities. Let's start with material footprint. So material footprint is defined as the total amount of raw materials extracted to meet final consumption demands. It is one indication of the pressures placed on the environment to support economic growth and to satisfy the material needs of people. So here we can see on this chart is that as time has been going on since 2000 all the way to 2017, the material has increased. Population has increased, as well as material footprint and the GDP growth index. So this indicates as population increases, there's more consumption in our world. This is alarming as this creates a much more and higher environmental impact in our cities.
Just 1 second, Dr. Fernandez. This is the same trend that we have in plastic, no? Dr. Fernandez has showed the trend for material footprint, so for the use in general of material. We saw that with the Industrial Revolution, with the growth, the communities also after the Second World War, the use of material has grown, and the same trend that we can see here for material footprint is the same if we apply that just for plastic. Okay, thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
Okay, material footprint. The material footprint, here you can see the per capita from 2000 and 2017. Here we can see the low income, as it also has been increased, lower middle income, as well as upper middle income and high income, and around the world. So material footprint per capita has increased dramatically since the 1990s. So this is quite alarming. So since 2000, the material footprint of upper middle income countries had increased at alarming rates. High income countries have the highest material footprint. The material footprint of high income countries is greater than their domestic material consumption, meaning that these countries rely on primary materials extracted elsewhere and subsequently imported. So as our cities are increasing, it is important to monitor these different issues that are happening. So how do we calculate the material footprint? So the total material footprint is the sum of the material footprint for biomass, fossil fuels, metal ores, and non-metal ores. So material footprint of consumption reports the amount of primary materials required to serve final demand of a country and can be interpreted as an indicator for the material standard of living of an economy. So here you can see the formula that is used, which RMEIM is the raw material equivalent of imports. DE is a domestic extraction. RMEEX is the raw material extraction of exports. So this allows us to calculate the material footprint. Moving on to material flow analysis. Material flow analysis is the systemic assessment of the flows and stocks of materials within a system defined in space and time. So we talked about that it is important for cities to measure the material that goes into cities, the material that comes out of cities, as well as the material that remains in the city. So here we can see a Sankey visualization that allows us to understand how this process works. So how do you calculate material flow analysis? material flow analysis is composed from the law of conservation of energy, which is the first law of thermodynamics, states that the energy cannot be created nor destroyed in an isolated system. Principle of mass balance, which is similar to energy, mass cannot be destroyed, but can only transform within a defined system. So here we can understand how to calculate material flow analysis, where MI inputs represents the total mass of material inputs. And the melt output is the total mass of material outputs. The M stock is the total mass of material stocks present in the system. So it's the idea of understanding what are the inputs, the outputs, and the stock that are within a system's border.
Just 1 second. If you can go back to the, okay. So I don't know if every one of you have dealt with the second principle of thermodynamics. Are you familiar with that? Okay. So in this vision, in this, we can say formula, we can really see also the systemic approach that the metabolism of cities had. This systemic approach is try to understand a system, like a group of things, or like a community, a city, or even a cell, because the comparison is with a cell, as a system, no? And in a system, we have input, we have output, but is valid the second principle of thermodynamics. So the energy is just transforming, and also the matter is not like, is just transforming. Nothing is created, nothing is deleted. It's just transformed in a way. So this is basically a balance equation. Okay, that, and here we are see some important elements that are the input, outputs, and stocks. The stocks are, we can say, the thing that can let change in a way the balance between what is in and what is out. Sorry, Dr. Fernandez.
So material flow analysis has been utilized in several industrial organizations. Some industrial applications, so here you can see some examples of how material flow analysis has been utilized in order to quantify different types of materials. So it helps us also understand a product's life cycle. It monitors material losses to the environment and helps us understand the extent and distribution of pollution. So here we can see on the right, the quantification of abandoned fish gears in Norway. And so through these different types of material flow analysis assessments, we have a better understanding of how we can improve the system based on specific systems boundaries. Material flow analysis industrial applications. So it also helps different organizations and companies improve their productivity through monitoring production by also understanding the consumption chain, quantifying and benchmarking material intensities, as well as understand assessments over time. So here we see on the right, raw material intensity and how it has decreased from 1994 to 2005 in Germany. And also you can see some material intensity by sector, where you can see all the different types of areas from agriculture, manufacturing, foodstuff and beverages, chemical products, glass, ceramics, etc., and based by different sectors. You can also see how it could be utilized to understand the consumption of abiotic raw materials by sector. So looking at different types of sectors in a much more specific scope can really help us understand the productivity for different types of areas here.
Just 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. This is very interesting because in industrial application, material flow analysis is utilized for understand productivity. But let's imagine that maybe we want to use this material flow analysis for our purposes. Now that, for example, is understanding the uh, environmental risk of the production of plastic. Okay? So we saw the production of plastics since the oil refinement, the production of nardos, and transformation to object, and so on. So how we can use, in your opinion, the material flow analysis to assess the risk? So in which way you will use this tool eventually to understand the potential risks?
Material flow analysis has also been utilized
Just
to,
one second. I make a
okay,
question to you. Okay.
sure.
So how will you use this? We have this tool now that is creating mass balance. It can analyze the productivity in industrial sector, is utilized for understanding the productivity, for example, of an industrial sector. How we can use that, for example, to assess the risk. I give you just a hint of that. One of our biggest problems, and we always say that we can say not easily track the plastic that is gonna go into the environment in different stage of the, you can say, production of plastic and so on and so forth. So if in industrial application we want to understand, for example, for such amount of input, which amount of output we are going to produce, so the efficiency of the project, of the process. If we want to use material flow analysis for understanding and measure, for example, the environmental problem, we can understand the losses, no? So we can use this tool not for the input, not just for the output result, but maybe for the difference between input output. And if we are monitoring at each stage of the production the losses, so the differences between input and output, we can have an estimation of the plastic that, for example, go into the environment. Now, imagine the nardos, no? If we are just measuring input and output, we know how much nardos are gone, for example, for traveling and so on and so forth. And so, even though we can say a direct measure is difficult because it's not easy to direct measure the amount of nardos that are in the sea because they are whatever and so on. But this tool can give you the possibility to estimate. You're just measuring the input, so what you produce, and then what is come as an output. Just to make an example on how we can use this tool for our purpose. Sorry, Dr. Fernandez, please.
Material flow analysis has been utilized by several different industrial sectors as a way to also close loop systems. So this type of analysis can help us map exchange of material flow across different types of sectors. It can help us clean the physical flows of materials with supply chain and actors, and assess opportunities for developing closed loop industrial practices. So here on the right, we have an example of how that can be visualized, looking at the recovery options for waste coming from C and D, actors and associates. So here we can see the different sectors and how they interact with each other. Additionally, material flow analysis has also been utilized inside the industrial sectors to forecast the use of resources. It helps us not only to forecast the use of resources, but also the future use of the resources. It helps us clean the physical flows of materials with economic and indicators, and assess the dynamic changes in material flows pertaining to contextual factors. So here we can see the GDP growth rate, the gross investment, the construction outputs, the construction material use for different countries around the world, and see the comparison between biomass, fossil fuels, metals, non-metallic minerals. And this type of information can really help us understand the movement of flows that are moving around the world. Additionally, material flow analysis has also been utilized in order to understand the material criticality and the importance. It helps us to assess the movement of primary materials and secondary, which could be recovered materials, as well as examination of the possible impacts of changes in demand, cross applications, for example, risk of competition. Here we can see an image of global distribution of lithium batteries, critical material reserves, and where they're located across the world. Additionally, we see a Sankey looking at a specific resource, and we can have a better understanding of where the imports are located in the amount, as well as the exports, if that is based on specific materials, different waste, products, etc.
Sorry, Dr. Fernandez, can you go back in 2 slides ago, where there was the feedback loops? Okay, yeah. Also, one little thing about this. We reasoned in one of the first lesson about the fate of plastic, no? So just to understand how much amount of plastic was recycled, was mismanagement and so on and so forth. If we build, you can say, a sort of graphics like this, understanding which are the feedback loops and which are, for example, the leverage. No, in the other slide that Dr. Fernandez has showed, she showed also the different materials, different raw material that has been used into the industrial system. So if we build up this, we can say, model, we can understand also which are the leverage in which we can eventually intervene to improve or you say increase the amount of plastic that is recycled. No? Once we figure out how the system is working, also with the feedback loops, we can really use, we can say, some of these indicators, some of these flows, also as a leverage. Maybe we, having a big picture of the problem, we can understand that maybe furnishing more of a certain matter, a certain raw material, we can improve the recycling of plastic production, because we understand that the process of the plastic production is made by plastic, but also by, I don't know, heat, but also by another thing. And if we are increasing that, we can also increase the amount of plastic that is recycled. So again, material flow analysis can give us a more systemic vision of the process. And when we have a more clear picture, we can also intervene better. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, now we're moving on to a different type of environmental assessment. This is called life cycle assessment, which is a methodological framework to compile and quantify the inputs, the outputs, and potential environmental impacts of a product or process throughout its life cycle. Life cycle assessment, also known as LCA, establishes an environmental profile of the system. So here we can see the different categories, for example, from virgin inputs, the life cycle stage, the greenhouse gas emissions, all the way to sinks and emission offsets. The life cycle assessment has been developed it looks at all the different areas from the initiation of the material all the way to its death. It looks at the raw material acquisition. It looks also at the material processing, the manufacture and assembly stage, the use and service, the retirement and recovery, the treatment disposal, and all the different stages in between, in order to have a better understanding also the recycling process within all these different stages. So what is the relevance of life cycle assessment? Looking at the burden shifting between life cycle stages or impact categories. So here we can see how it can identify potential burden shifting between life cycle stages or impact categories, allowing us to have a better understanding of the local level, the global issues as well from it, the multi-criteria, looking at the qualitative and quantitative. So it's looking at all the different stages from the risk analysis, the carbon footprint of all that has been found. So what is another relevance of life cycle assessments? Also looking at the burden shifting to other industrial processes. So here we can see how the impact has been issued based on the different improvements of manufacturing. So here we can look at the reduction of impacts for manufacturing compared to the raw materials, the different stages like distribution, the use, the end of life. But also we can look at the aggravation in other steps as well. So here we can see, for example, from the impact all the way to from the raw materials, manufacturing, distribution, use, end of life. So it's looking at all the different stages of the industrial processes. So what is another relevance of life cycle assessment? It also allows us to understand the burden shifting to other industrial sectors. So here we can see from an impact category to another one with the example of biofuels. Here we can see that the decrease of the impact compared to the climate change, how it's also should be included, and also during the use phase. But also it looks at the generation of other impacts during the agricultural phase for biofuels. So it's looking at the entire system and understanding the different consequences and challenges found within. And also looking at the topic of electric vehicles as another example. So here we can see the decrease of the impact, also making sure we involve the issues of climate change, and then also during the use phase. Looking at the greenhouse emissions, CO2 emissions, but also looking at the impacts during the production of electricity. So it's looking at all the different consequences from the initiation of making sure we have electric vehicles, the different processes that were developed during the electric vehicles. So life cycle assessment framework is incorporated into 4 different areas. It looks, in order to develop the life cycle assessment, you must first identify the goals and the scope of the definition of your challenge. Develop an inventory analysis, also an impact assessment, and finally the interpretation. And it's always important to go back and forth to make sure that everything aligns. So some direct applications, for example, are product development and in order to improve also the product, looking at ways to develop strategic planning. It has also been utilized in public policy making as well as marketing and other areas as well.
Just one second. Okay. I don't know if you have heard about life cycle assessment even before the lesson. Did you hear about this term, life cycle assessment, even before? Did you know about the existence? Yeah. Actually, this has been one of the, you can say, game changer into environmental economics and also into the environmental risk assessment and so on. Because really it's changed the view of the environmental problem, not just to one process, just to not just one stage, but on the full process of production. For example, when in the first lesson we saw that plastic is not just a plastic problem, but is also a climate problem, no? And we try to give some numbers about the carbon footprint of the production of plastic. That's true, because when we are dealing with the production of industrial material and so on and so forth, It's not just the damages that the material can do. No, we in the first part of the course we just saw what plastics can do when is in the environment, when is going to degrade in macroplastic and so on. But there are also some impacts that are related to the production itself of plastic. And if you want really to make a comprehensive assessment of the real impacts that are related to plastic or any other pollutant, the life cycle assessment is the, you can say, most comprehensive one, because it's going to address the problem from the source, from the burn of the source, so when the product is produced, till the, you can say, disposal and so on and so forth. And has been, as I said, a game changer because it's one of the most complete. Thank you.
Okay. Now we can move to a different type of environmental assessment tool, which is systems dynamics, also known as SD. Well, it helps us and enable visual demonstration of the collective impacts of different exogenous factors over time, thereby depicting dynamic, nonlinear evolution of the system's variables. So here we can see an example of plastic waste generation, the process of waste from the real income capita, the plastic waste generation, the plastic waste stock, and the plastic packaging waste, as well as the externalities and damage of ecology. So it's how they all interact with one another, looking at all the different factors, the negative and positive externalities. The systems dynamic assessment of externalities goes beyond material flow analysis. So it looks at several different aspects. From here, we have the example of, let's say, plastic. So here we can see that it starts from the virgin polymers, then it goes into plastics production, plastic produce, plastic good production, plastic goods produce, consumption, sorted waste, collected of sorted waste, waste to recycling, and then as well, recycling going back into the plastics production. So it's looking at all the different areas as well as the processing of waste, the imported plastics good, the exported plastics goods, leakages and littering, mixed waste, sorted waste scraps, exported sorted waste, and recycling scraps. So here we can see the entire, let's say, system.
Just 1 second. Did you know what the word externality means? Have you ever heard? No. Okay. So in economics, or in general in industrial economics, an externality is everything that is going out to the process of production. Okay. So for example, I'm gonna produce, I don't know, this cell phone. Okay. All the parts that maybe are remaining from the production that are not part of the cell phone, but they have been used for producing the cell phone, but are not anymore useful. They are called externalities, and usually in the classical economics, all these things are gonna go out from the process, and are called externalities because ideally they are going out from my view, out from my system. We will see that externalities actually are not going, are not disappearing, no, as sometimes the classical economic is thinking, but just they are changing the place. No, we saw pollution that is something that is in another place. Actually, externalities can be a source of pollution, because the normal industrial system is just thinking that they are gone away from our view, our system, but they just change the place. And so this system dynamics tool is going to help us to take track of these externalities. Thank you.
So here we can see the system's dynamic assessment of externalities, where it not only looks at the entire system as a whole, in this case here, we're looking at plastics again. But additionally, looking at the different factors, the economic factors, looking at the process cost, for example, consumer demand, the market shift, the competition of the material, from also looking at the recycled plastics as well. The technical aspect, the material properties, the technology readiness, industrial infrastructure development, the urban infrastructure development, looking at the environmental factor as well, from the toxic additives and substances, the energy consumption. Additionally, looking at the regulatory factor, from the circular economy and sustainable development directives, the incentive, the tax schemes, market regulations, the engagement in EPR, and also the informational, looking at the data transparency and traceability along the value chain. And lastly, the social cultural, which is the consumer awareness and the consumer behavior. So here you can see the entire assessment of not only the negative, but also the positive externalities and the environmental factors, social and economic. Additionally, we have a statistical entropy analysis, which is another tool used to assess the different recyclability of different waste materials based on the embodied energy level. So here we can see how a breakdown of how it works. So here we have a plastic bag, and then now we can break it down even further by understanding that this plastic bag is one product. It has 10 components within, and it is made of 3 different materials as well, with different percentages, and looking at the different substances. The substance level entropy also helps us describe the substances distribution within the materials through the plastic structures, from the substances dispersion, as well as the substance level entropy. It also allows us to understand the component level of entropy, which describes the substances distribution inside the components by means of the materials present in the components assembly. Additionally, looking at the product level entropy, which helps us describe the overall structural complexity of the plastic waste. It takes into account the number of different components present within their composition. So here you can see the breakdown of how that works. Also, look, this is another example of how the energy calculation can be determined. So first, you need to gather, let's say, the materials, sort, do the pre-treating, and then doing the processing. So this process allows us to do the decomposition of the energy. And here we can see again the breakdown of how this works, looking at the components, the product itself, breaking it down to substances, and then understanding further the different materials that are found within the substances.
Just 1 second, Dr. Fernandez. Okay. So this think of the entropy is very interesting, because I don't know if you know, in physics or in chemistry, entropy is sometimes the measure of chaos or the measure of disorder that is inside a system and so on. In this case, the system is the product. Okay. So thinking about this concept of statistical entropy analysis, how do you connect, for example, on the role of the chemical compounds into the plastic that we saw in the first part? So how can you connect the two concepts? What we saw? We saw that basically the plastic that have some additives inside, some more chemical inside, are in a way more pollutant, okay? Because we can associate a little bit this concept also with this thing of the entropy, no? Because basically they also have more entropy inside. Okay? And so when the energy that is done for producing them is released in the environment, they release a lot of entropy and also a lot of distribution, also you can say of disorder inside the ecosystem and so on and so forth. So actually, it returns a bit the idea that the plastic that have a lot of chemicals inside, they can have also a lot of entropy inside, and in a way, they are more pollutant than others, no? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Yep. So here we can see how the breakdown and the recyclability metrics. So here we first have to understand the components. So an example of a drinking bottle. So we understand the relative entropy, also the normalized and the absolute. In addition, the cleaning product bottle could be another example, looking also at plastic bag, the takeaway containers, like through wrapping, as well as packets, cups. So these are all different examples of the recyclability metrics. So the R1 allows us to normalize, shows the distance from the maximum. The R2 is useful for comparison, and this allows us to understand the entropy as well as the recyclability indicator. Oh, and that's about it on my side. But basically, what we went through today is looking at different types of environmental assessment tools from the qualitative aspect as well as the quantitative aspect, that these tools are out there in order to help local governments visualize and explore the issues that are happening within our local governments, within our cities at the local level, the let's say national level, and global level. And so through using these type of environmental assessment tools, we're able to visualize what exactly is happening and how we can improve it. So we talked about using several aspects as reduce, recycle, as some ideas in order to reduce some of these consumption levels within our cities. But through the use of urban metabolism, we can have a better idea of how to understand the existing conditions and how our cities are affected socially, environmentally, and economically. And through these different types of assessments, we're able to develop awareness and also how vulnerable communities are affected. In order for the UN Sustainable Development Goals to advocate and also localize these SDG goals at the global level, the state and national level, we need to work on developing, let's say, these different types of environmental assessments through accounting measures in order to have a better way to help local governments achieve the SDGs. So thank you very much. Let me know if there's any questions, Dr. Vita.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Fernandez, for your amazing lesson. And thank you also for, say, standing. I know that it's very late there. I don't know if there are questions for Dr. Fernandez, even curiosities on what she presents or on the activity also of the Metabolism of Cities Living Lab. In the meanwhile, that maybe students are thinking about a question, I want to say, and also maybe Dr. Fernandez, I want to ask you to reinforce the metabolism of cities is also a movement, no? And there is also around in internet some resources that can be available if someone wants to know more and so on. I know that you develop also a mock for that, and also you have some videos that are more related to these single tools, no? Also, if you want to use that for your research and so on and so forth. Yeah, if you want to say a little bit more about that.
Yes, no, I just want to say that my research has focused on the topic of urban metabolism for some years, and we develop a platform called metabolismofcities.org. So you can visit the website if you are interested to know more about it. In this website, metabolismofcities.org, there's a lot of different information about how to create your own material flow analysis, but also looking at different examples here. If you take a picture of the QR code, you can find out also more examples from different researchers and scholars. In the past, we've developed a type of course in English as well as in Spanish on what exactly urban metabolism is, how to develop your own material flow analysis, following several different steps. And at the end of this mock course, you earn a certificate through the UN. So there's quite a lot of information, and I can share also can go on the website as well. So if you just type in metabolism of cities.org, that should take you to this website, and you can find a lot of different resources, different projects that we worked on in the past. But there's a section called go to our projects, and there's called Metabolism of Cities Educational Hub. When you click on the educational hub, you can see the different courses that we have worked on in the past. We created modules to help people understand how to utilize urban metabolism at the policy level, as well as how to conduct your own material flow analysis from the whole entire process of the data collection, the data processing, and the data outputs. So you can take a further look at that. You can also take a look and see what other researchers have done in the past concerning urban metabolism. So these are all different researchers that have uploaded their thesis to on the topic of urban metabolism.
Okay. Thank you. We have a little bit of time, and maybe Dr. Fernandez, we can focus a little bit more on one peculiar thing that the Metabolism Cities Living Lab of San Diego is doing. That is the addressing of the SDGs. If you can return 1 second to the slide of the SDGs. Okay. Now the other one where all the SDGs. Okay, perfect. So for the ones that are not familiar with this framework, we will see also again into the next lesson and so on. SDGs are a group of, you can say, goals that in 2015, the United Nations has decided to create by nation for nation, because this goal has been created by an assembly of nations, but for the further nation of the future, in order to achieve a healthy, prosperous, and sustainable future. Basically, these are coming from a path. No, before, I don't know if you know, but before the SDGs, there were other global goals in the UN framework that were called Millennium Development Goals. And the Millennium Development Goals were some goals that the nation want to achieve for the 2000, for the millennium. Okay, and basically this goal was to eradicate poverty, fight anger, and so on and so forth. So to create the base ground for all the nation to, we can say, create a prosperous future. So after the Millennium Development Goal, the next goal for the next decades, the SDGs has been set in 2015, and they are gonna go till 2030. Actually, we are quite there with we can say the checkpoint on how it was going with the SDGs. But basically, the new agenda that was set in 2015 has promoted 17 goals. Okay? 17 goals that are organized in goals, the one that you can see here, no poverty, no anger, well-being, and so on. As you can see, are global goals that we say are a mission for the nation, for the community to grow in a sustainable way. But the very system of the Sustainable Development Goals are not just these goals. There is a complete framework of goals, targets. So each goal have several targets to reach. And as we say always, we cannot measure what we cannot manage, what we cannot measure. These Sustainable Development Goals have also a set of metrics, a set of indexes that want to monitor the progress towards these goals. And Dr. Fernandez was mentioning that on her presentation when she was talking about the leave no one behind indicators. So I want to ask to Dr. Fernandez properly to focus on these, no, on the concept of leave no one behind. That is, we can say, a kind of very peculiar thing that the Metabolism of Cities Living Lab is doing. Among the framework of the SDGs, that is this big framework of goals, targets, and indicators, maybe the next lesson we can see a little bit more in detail. There are some of them that are particular because they are responding properly to this mission of leave no one behind. So what is the concept of leave no one behind? And just say a few words, then I leave to Dr. Fernandez to explain better and so on. So the idea is that, of course, we can achieve a sustainable development. We can grow, we can make greener communities, more healthy communities, and so on and so forth. But if we are not addressing the most vulnerable, all our efforts to achieve the best of the best is basically not fruitful, okay? Just imagine the cities, no? If we just develop the center of the city, like not thinking about the neighbors, that city is not secure, that city is not healthy, that city is not completely green, and so on. Because the idea is properly that the city as a whole, all the parts of the city need to, we can say, grow together in synergy with leaving no one behind. Okay, and that's probably something that in the Metabolism of Cities Living Lab we are trying to address as much as we can. So I leave the floor to you, Dr. Fernandez, to say a little bit more about this concept of leave no one behind and also the leave no one behind indicators.
Yes, as Dr. Domenico Vito has mentioned that back in 2015, 193 countries came together in order to, let's say, achieve and have an agreement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. They identified these 17 SDG goals, but it's not only about identifying these 17 and tackling these 17 goals. It is also making sure that these countries are actually developing progress every single year. So this started back in 2015. So from 2015 up until 2030, every single country that's signed to be part of the Paris Agreement Accord, also known as, is assessed and evaluated at the end of every single year. And so looking at ways in how to help and understand it's not only about creating let's say projects on these different goals, but it's also making sure that no one is left behind during the process, making sure that local governments are looking at the entirely of the entire population. There's a quote from the Swiss Constitution, and it says, "The strength of a people is measured by the well-being of its weakest members." So we need to advocate and create awareness about these different vulnerable groups, if that is people with disabilities, elderly, homeless, refugees, different types of ethnic communities that are currently being left behind, to make sure that these local governments are also including them in their new policies. And so that is exactly what we do in the Metabolism of Cities Living Lab. We try to work on real life projects that are found at the local level. We try to identify these vulnerable groups, trying to using different types of strategies by looking at hotspot analysis to understand if maybe specific areas within the city has high concentrations of pollution, are completely ignored by local governments. And through these different types of analysis, we're able to determine and give a voice to those that are currently left behind. So you as researchers, as students, it is also your duty to, let's say, develop projects or create awareness and make sure that you're also advocating for those that are currently left behind. It's not necessarily only people, but also nature and our animals, right? So again, we have one planet and we have to develop different strategies in order to bring awareness on some of these different issues. You as students in your class.
Thank you, Dr. Fernandez. Just to make a connection with the next lesson, among the set of SDGs from the next lesson, we can say extrapolate basically two, that are the 11 and the 12. The 11 is like to build the sustainable cities, is very addressed to the cities, and the 12 indeed is to promote sustainable and responsible consumption and production. Why these two goals are very important for our course? Because the responsible, especially the 12, the responsible and sustainable production and consumption is something that is very connected to the plastic problem, okay? You will see that also thanks to some SDG indicators, we can really monitor the progress towards like a paradigm shift also in what we were saying, no? Plastic is not the problem. Plastic is just a material. Plastic is something that can be useful, but the way on we produce that and the over amount of production is not wealthy. Okay, so we have to change. And this mission of like changing the way on how we produce plastic is also part of the SDG 12. So when we are making some policies regarding best plastic production and so on and so forth, we are also addressing one of these goals, in particularly the 12. If we are addressing that into the cities, you say, not only the 12 is the SDG concern, but also the 11th, that is talking about, you can say, more livable and more sustainable cities. But we will see these two, especially these two SDGs, on the next lesson. Now, we have just very few minutes. I want really from you, if you have some question, also comments. I mean, from the lesson, if you were just knowing these tools, if you think that they can be useful, also, I mean, not just for this course, also maybe for your activities and so on and so forth. So just let's have the opportunity to have with us Dr. Fernandez for these few minutes. If you have also some suggestion or something to ask about her activity and so on and so forth. So she's in SDSU. I don't know how many of you are from California. Oh, you. Ah, okay. So if you can, I don't remember from which university you were. California. Ah, okay, 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 okay. Also, I think that I will talk also on behalf of Dr. Fernandez. Once you are come back in the US, the lab is always open to eventually visit if you want to know more about us. I don't know, Dr. Fernandez, if you want to tell a little bit more about the possible students project that the metabolists can have and so on.
Yeah, so as of now, we have several different graduate students that we're working with from the Master of Science in Big Data Analytics. So the majority of our volunteers have been graduate students, but we do have a current undergraduate student. As of now, we're always open to accepting volunteers from different departments. But the idea is the same. We work on projects related to vulnerable communities in the US as well as in different areas around the world. We've worked in different areas in Africa as well as in Central America and South America. Currently, we're working on a project called Kiara Project, and the idea is to work on the topic of immigrant women along the US-Mexico border. But we also hope to expand to the Venezuela-Colombia border as well. One of our students is currently working on developing a chat box, like a type of chat GPT, on the topic of nutrition for those that don't have access to healthcare. So using this type of chat box can bring more awareness and knowledge on the topic of nutrition in these different borders that we're, let's say, working on. And yeah, and we're definitely always open to work with different types of students. So if you are interested to be a volunteer with us in the summer or in the fall, please get in contact with Dr. Domenico Vito, and we can definitely explore options for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Fernandez. I think if there are no questions or comments from your side, we are gonna stop a little bit earlier. Okay. So thank you very much again to Dr. Fernandez, and thank you again for a lecture and also for staying with us this time. So we will see for the last lesson before the spring break on Wednesday. Okay. So see you on Wednesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.